and just try and set the scene a little bit with some of this content. There's quite a lot of themes in this little presentation. One of the things a client said to me just recently, we were going through a whole pile of feedback and areas of content around about service management, from practice and process and tools and leadership and all those kind of things. And they said, yeah, that they were really getting the fact that, you know, everything is really connected, that there is that sense of you do one thing in one area and it has an impact somewhere else. And I think that to me is one of the big learnings of the last year in terms of COVID and so on, is that, you know, some fairly isolated event happens in a completely other part of the world, and it suddenly within, you know, weeks, months, and now a year or so has changed pretty much everything. The way we work, the way we live, what we do socially, what we can and we can't do. Obviously, huge impact in terms of health and well-being for so many people. And you know, I think there is this. Always had this sense that, you know, service management is a number of moving parts, and that you don't just look at one particular area, you have to see it in the round. And I think governance is one of the things that we kind of talk about it, we mention it, we say, oh yes, we need to have good governance, we need to use that. And one thing more and more I'm seeing is a need to really understand what that means. How does it help us to co-create value? How does it help us to deliver better customer experience? How does it help us to achieve our business objectives? And you know, I think that's one of the big learning points that we need to take forward. Everything's joined up. We need to look at it in the round. We've been talking about, you know, design thinking, systems thinking for a long time. And it sounds like some great philosophical idea, but that's really what it is that everything is joined up, and we need to make sure that we manage it appropriately, or we try to understand it as best we can in the round, and not just in individual silos and buckets and so on. So I'm going to just talk around a few aspects of, particularly around about digital transformation and enterprise service management, you know, going across the organization, understanding how things work, not just in our area, but in other teams, and maybe then being able to leverage that to our advantage to be able to get more value coming out. This is a slide that I've had for a little while, but it actually brought it back in for this because I think it's just, you know, without going into detail about it, I think we are looking at a number of things like how we work together, how we understand our business, whether that's of our organization that we work for and or of our and their customers, how we can innovate, how we provide assurance, and most of all, how we provide governance. And you know, we talk about all the artifacts that are within Aitchison, ITO, and all the other areas of it. But those basically, I think, are key elements. And I will come back to this in a second. But talking about service management, it's doing a number of these quite big things. And I know, and you know, from being part of the ITO 4 architect team, you know, we did think very carefully about, you know, what's the big picture that we need to. You know, we're not just going to come along here and try and rewrite, you know, incident management. We've got to do something that's really going to make a difference at a much more strategic level. So we really want to look at that just quickly. And we talk about things like customer experience. What does that really mean? It's not just customer satisfaction. It's about what it's actually like to use the service. What's it like to be a customer, you know, walk a mile in your shoes and all that sort of thing. And it's definitely something that you have to do with your customers or users, not just something you can make up yourself. I like to think about it from this perspective of, you go to the theatre. Well, we used to go to the theatre, we used to go to concerts and so on. But when that returns, there's a number of analogies that we can think of there in terms of the front of house activity and the back of house activity and the audience. And you know, a theatre on its own, it is a nice place, but nothing happens. The value happens, the magic happens when not only are the actors and singers and musicians and so on performing, but when the audience is there. So the value comes from the performance, and that is something that is I'm trying not to use the word co-create here, but that's something that is shared. It's a shared experience. You look at those of you that maybe like sport, the vacuousness of watching a lot of the sport at the moment with no fans. I mean, I do follow sport, I watch it, but I really don't enjoy it particularly because there's no atmosphere, there's no kind of feedback, there's no actual shared experience going on that you can sort of tune into, and certainly watching it on TV, it's immeasurably dull in my view. And actually, thinking about it from the service delivery perspective, it's the same thing. We co-create value when we actually, yes, when we provide services and value streams and all that. But actually, it's when that is consumed and used and engaged with, that's when the value bit happens. So we've got to think about how we're set up to do that. And the sort of back end of that is looking at our internal value streams. And we've got to look at the experience part of that, which is the front end, the customer part, the audience. What's that actually like? And all those things combine together to provide the experience. And again, we don't just think about it in terms of one single team. We don't just think about it from the position of the orchestra or the lighting guys or one or two particular actors or actresses. We think about it from the whole experience. So if you're working in an organization and you want to bring on a new person, you don't think about it, well, it's just going to think about it from the IT perspective, or I'm just going to think about it from the HR perspective. You think about it from the organization and how we're going to bring that person in and what they need and how well and how quickly we can do that stuff. And that, I suppose, is just the kind of lead into when we're talking about things like enterprise service management. The other way of thinking about it is this outside in as opposed to inside out. We've tend to look at things internally from an inside out perspective, from our IT perspective, and we've got to reach out and think about experience from the end user, the customer, the client, the stakeholder, colleague, however we are describing them at the moment, but not just from our perspective. And I think that's what we're aiming to achieve with this definition of co-creation of value. I think it's a good one. The other analogy is the railway network is of no value on its own until the trains start running through it. The theatre is empty and bereft of any value until an audience is in and people are actually performing on stage, and that's where the value actually happens. So the value comes from somebody using the system or a service and getting some outcome from it, and that then has to drive our thinking around about what we measure and what we manage and how we define our success, not just based on some random old SLAs. But don't get me started about SLAs. Just taking the theme a little bit forward for today, we're talking about enterprise, particularly enterprise service management. What is that? Well, it's an interesting point, actually. We've got some definitions there that kind of work, and I'll throw up some other ones in a little bit of time. But one thing I was thinking about and have been discussing lately is this idea of enterprise service management and also digital transformation. And I've heard a lot of confusion and misunderstanding or overlap around about those things. So I put some questions out on LinkedIn last week to see what kind of feedback I'd get. To what extent would you say that enterprise service management and digital transformation, maybe are they the same thing, or do they just overlap in the marketing world? But also, we talk a lot about enterprise service management as being something that happens over organizations, the whole organ. Does anybody actually use that term outside of IT? I got quite a lot of quite interesting response. Now, I'm not going to read all through all this. You'll have access to these slides, and we can probably stick them up. I can see that there's material for a blog here, but this is all out actually on LinkedIn at the moment for those. Number of very eminent people came back with a whole number of quite different reactions to this. Some people saying that they are the same thing. Some people saying that they are overlapping, and then some really quite interesting analysis around that. The one at the bottom there, ask 100 people in the real world about digital transformation. I think not one will mention enterprise service management. Whereas also I got feedback saying, no, it is a thing, it is used in lots of different areas. And that was maybe more of a North American perspective. So there's no right and wrong here. I just thought it'd be interesting to see. I do have other things that came out where people are saying they are completely different things, and why are you even asking this question? And sometimes I felt it was like being back at school. It's like I'm not angry with you. I'm just disappointed. Why did you ask this question? And I asked it for a very specific reason, which is to see what people actually came back and said. So there is lots of different perspectives on this. I think my favorites are on this page, that the companies accepting that service management is less IT and more enterprise is a transformation on its own. I think that's a really good point. They are related, but not the same thing. Enterprise service management is, in that person's opinion, an aspect of digital transformation. Fair enough. Some people saying, I just don't see any overlap at all, because it's very clear to me. I have got these definitions that I use, and they are different. So, live with it, kind of thing. So there is quite a grey area here. There's, we definitely got the Venn diagram where the two bubbles are joined up, and there's a lot of areas in the middle. I think that obviously that provides a lot of fuel from the marketing point of view to stir up debate and to get things going, and to some extent I've kind of done that a little bit. I can't deny that. But let's just clarify then. I mean, I really like Stephen Mann's definition of enterprise service management: the use of ITSM principles and capabilities in other business areas to improve performance and service. Yeah, that makes sense to me. A really good one from Stephen at BMC: enterprise systems management is the practice of applying IT service management to other areas of an enterprise or organization with the purpose of improving performance. So it's using IT service management in a broader way across organizations, not just in the IT field. I think that's pretty clear, and that's certainly the definition I try and use. And to clarify on digital transformation, and this is from the recent DITS book, Digital IT Service. I've got it in front of me here. I can't remember the exact title. But the use of digital technology to enable digital IT strategy. Apologies. The use of digital technology to enable a significant improvement that could not have feasibly been achieved by non-digital means. So the technology is really key here. I think that's important. But I think, as we all know, it's not just the technology that has to be looked at. And again, this is a diagram from that same book that makes it very clear that there's a whole number of incredibly complex, interrelated aspects of what needs to be done and thought about and used in doing that. So that's just me making everything a little bit confusing before the start of the day. And this also comes from the same book, which I think is really useful, how we think about where these things fit in. And I know certainly in some of Ian's content, he's talking about, kind of hierarchy of service management and digital transformation and so on. We might see it from that kind of concept. I really just want to, before I be quiet, just really look at what I think are the kind of practical areas that we're talking about when we're looking at enterprise service management. And it's a very simple, basic diagram, but I think what we've traditionally thought in terms of areas of work for enterprise service management, and it's not a new thing. When I was a service desk manager 300 years ago, we started logging tickets, incidents on our service management tool for everything in the organization. I still remember there was an incident that came through with potato peeler not working, which was it was quite an industrial potato peeler in the canteen, but it just made me go, what on earth is going on here? But it made perfect sense. But I think we've always thought that, there's the IT stuff on the left-hand side and there's the business stuff on the right-hand side, and there's areas where they're going to match up. And we kind of have always thought that ESM is going to be that bit in the middle, isn't it? It's going to be somehow that we use one or other of those systems to translate or to use the platforms and the processes to work across and to make that much more seamless to do the co-creation of value. So when we talk about instance problems, request change, and so on, the business people might go, faults just work, moving things around, projects, targets, and knowledge. I think there's a huge area, though, in terms of activities and particularly tools and application of tools that sits in the middle. And it's not just always the same tools. In many cases, it is. And, when you do have digitally enabled platforms that will cover a lot of this stuff, like I'm sure Pat will talk about from Hornbill's perspective, then a lot of those things can be applied from your tool set. But there's other areas as well and other options that come through to fill those, fill out those green boxes in terms of digitization, integration, the user experience, workflow, and so on. And these are the things that I'm talking about in terms of the various green boxes there that would be applied. And you'll find that there are tools that do those things, or there are tools that do this bit, or it's part of your overall tool set. And that's where it makes the market quite interesting at the moment, but also quite confusing. And I think it's important that we just understand that there's more than just managing tickets. It's more than just, managing requests and approvals. There's a whole pile of other things that we do in that area. The other thing, and this is just the final point, is around governance, that actually all of this is part of what the organization does. And when we talk about governance, I know people kind of sort of glaze over and think, oh, this is some kind of, horrible corporate control, freakery or dull administration. Governance is actually, I think, the most interesting part of where we are with real development with service management, because it is about looking at what we do and ensuring that it happens from a corporate perspective, and not just from any individual team or silo or areas perspectives. And it's back to this thing about how do we co-create value? How do we make stuff work together across the organization to achieve common goals? And somebody, there needs to be some mechanism, and it can be a board, it can be a separate steering board, it can be some people, it can be an external party or whatever, or a combination of those things that is tasked with saying, right, where is it we want to go? What do we want to do? Are we doing this? And if we're not, what do we need to do to make sure that we are, or reset our targets? Now that's the work of anybody who's ever done any kind of non-executive director type work. That's what a board does. That's what we're there to say. Look, it's happening or it's not happening. And if it's not happening, then we can do something about it, not let it go for a year and then we look at some report that says, oh, we didn't achieve it. And everybody goes, oh, that's terrible, but nothing happens. So governance, I think, is the thing that really will make a difference. And it's there, it's part of the, the overall service value system that we've defined within things like ITIL 4, but also in other models as well. It's, we need to have a good governance model. It's there to ensure that things happen in the way they should, that co-creation of value happens, that people are working together for shared goals. And, whatever is needed to do that happens. So maintains is an important point, because it's never finished. It's the fourth bridge. It will never be fully painted. It's always going to be continuing to go on and be updated and managed on an ongoing basis. And I think if we really understand that, the requirement, the ongoing part of that, the flexible part of that, the needs to get people working across the organization and based on business goals and also the experience, not just we're delivering stuff, but is it actually working? Is it being consumed in a shared way and actually working together? That's how we actually becomes successful, and that service management really delivers its value for money. So what do we do? Well, we do all these things. We've been doing all these things for years, but we've been kind of thinking of it from a kind of superhuman point of view. But actually, it's really from this point of view. It's about doing those things: collaboration, business focus, business assurance, innovating, and providing governance. That's really what we do. And doing that across teams, well, yeah, of course, we need to. We can't just do it on our own. We rely on other teams as well, and so we should be working together. And one thing just coming out of that finally is that while we're saying mature governance is key, it's not something that is always driven by or should be driven by IT. IT's got a key role in it. And this idea of collaboration, co-creation is not a new idea, but it needs to be reinforced. So the governance part is important, but we also, I guess, from the service management perspective, needs to push up the issues to the top so that they are understood. That's why things like problem management, CSI, and so on are so valuable, because they do raise them to the top of the organization. So quick run through a whole number of things there, and really just trying to set out the scene so that the guys that are following have got something to react against and to disagree with or to agree with wholeheartedly. Really just trying to say enterprise service management, digital transformation, service management, governance, customer experience, all those things, they're all joined up, and we need to think about it from a holistic perspective.